Welcome back to the channel, guys. Tyrauku here, and today we're going to be comparing Staltus Dragonbane to Ragash. Now, before we get into this, I do want to wish you all, if you're celebrating Thanksgiving, a happy Thanksgiving. Hopefully you have some good times with family, as well as some good food. And if you're celebrating alone this year, hopefully you enjoy your time as well. I do know many people are in that situation, so I do hope things are going well for you if you are in that spot. Another thing, I highly recommend fixing this dish, okay? Whether you're the one cooking or somebody else is cooking, go ahead and send them this recipe, and I'm sure they'll cook it for you this weekend, right? So this is called sweet potato casserole. Some people say it's dessert, but if you classify it as just a regular meal, like a side item, then you can have it for the regular meal as well as dessert. And that kind of works out perfect. Basically, it's heaven in a casserole dish. We have sweet potatoes, we have brown sugar, pecans, and it's just so good. Now, obviously, if you're allergic to pecans, maybe not the thing you want to cook, but either way, probably my favorite Thanksgiving dish, flat out. So, moving on from the food, let's talk about Staltus and Ragash. Now, the reason why I want to compare these two champions is because, to be honest, these champions are very similar in a lot of ways. They're both defense-based champions. They both have very good multipliers on their AoE nuking skills, and they have a very similar kit, just in general. So I want to compare them, I want to take a look at them, and hopefully help you guys decide which one you want to actually build. Now, of course, if you have the resources to build them both, they're going to be amazing for faction wars. Just flat out, they're both going to basically allow you to do the respective faction wars without an issue. I mean, they both have an AoE stun, very, very consistent, which makes faction wars just a breeze. So Ragash and Staltus faction wars, 100% must build, 5-star rating, 10 out of 10, perfect champions. But maybe you're looking for an arena nuker. I want to get into that mostly. For other content, we can talk about that as well. But first things first, let's compare their base stats. So the base stats are what everything scales off of. So if you have a 50% increase from your gloves, for example, that 50% is going to be increasing from the base stat. So 20,000 HP plus that 50% is going to be what? About 10,000 HP is going to be added on. So keep that in mind. Base stats are very, very important because champions with really high base attack can scale to some crazy high attack numbers. Hence Trunda, why she's such a good nuker, easy to build a lot of attack on her because she has very high base attack. But we're not talking about Trunda today. So Staltus, HP 20,000, defense 1454, speed 99, crit rate 15%, crit damage 63%, and then accuracy is 10. Those are the main stats we're looking at. HP, defense, speed, crit rate, crit damage, and accuracy. Both of these champions do benefit from accuracy, but we're going to talk about if I actually would build that or not. So this is Staltus and then Ragash. You can see all of the red numbers are what Ragash has less than Staltus of. So pay attention, click over, less HP, less defense, and less crit damage. So Ragash has 18,000 HP, slightly lower than Staltus, about 2,000. He has slightly lower defense at 1443, whereas Staltus had 1454. And then he has slightly lower crit damage at 50% versus Staltus's 63%. So Staltus has an extra 13% crit damage. He has extra defense and he has extra HP. Accuracy is exactly the same. And then Ragash is 3 speed faster. So a little bit better as far as the speed goes, but everything else a little bit lower. I think it's weird that Ragash has 8 attack because attack is just not needed on these champions whatsoever. So as far as the base stats, Staltus is definitely winning out in this situation, in my opinion. So now let me jump in here and talk about the skills of these champions. So Staltus on his A1 brings a 2-hitter, which each hit decreases the turn meter by 10% of the target if they're under any debuff. So it's going to be a pretty easy condition to meet. His A2, also an AoE ability, attacks 2 times. Each hit, 50% chance, books up to a 65% chance of placing stun for 1 turn, which is a very, very good ability. His A3 is another nuking ability, which actually places increased defense on himself, meaning he doesn't need a Siphi, doesn't need a Doomscreech, doesn't need any increased defense champion running alongside him for him to actually hit pretty hard because he brings the increased defense himself. It also places a decreased speed on enemy support type champions and then a decreased crit damage on enemy nukers, basically. And then his passive ability basically makes him immune to weaken, decreased defense, and poison. Plus, his damage increases by 5% for each debuff on the target. So we have a passive ability that makes him immune to decreased defense, poison, and weaken. And then we have also a passive that increases damage by 5% for each debuff on the target. So an AoE stun, places defense on himself, some abilities that require accuracy, and then a very good passive. Taking a look at Ragash, his A1 places increased defense on himself, so any counterattacks, he increased defenses himself. No problem. The only issue is that if you're going to bring him in an arena situation, you're likely going to want to bring an increased defense champion because you may not get his A1 ability to actually activate before he does his A2. His A2 is what hits so hard, so you do have to be very mindful that you may not have that increased defense if you're not bringing a champion like Siphi or whatever other increased defense champion you're bringing, Mithrala, whatever it may be. So keep that in mind. His A2 ability, very similar to Staltus. Attacks all enemies, 75% chance, books up to 100% chance of placing decreased defense, which is amazing. So you don't have to bring a decreased defense champion on your team, assuming you're going to build this champion with accuracy. It does need accuracy to land. Places it for 2 turns before attacking, which is very, very important. So like Staltus places the increased defense before attacking, Ragash places a decreased defense before attacking. However, Ragash does need accuracy, so that will determine some differences in the build if you guys go that route. But he also has a 100% chance when fully booked of placing stun debuff for 1 turn after attacking. So Ragash is placing the decreased defense and then stunning, whereas Staltus is placing the increased defense on himself and then nuking. So their builds are going to be a little bit different in that sense. Ragash has only 1 AoE ability because his last ability places a 25% strengthen, a 30% increased speed on all allies for 2 turns, and also places a perfect veil buff on this champion for 2 turns. Very, very good passive. AoE strengthen and AoE increased speed, very good buffs to have really anywhere. And then his passive, at the start of each turn, places a perfect veil buff for 1 turn on the ally with the highest attack, which is very good. You're basically protecting those super squishy champions that you're bringing alongside, possibly this champion, wherever you're using him. His A1 is increased defense only on himself, though. He also, very similar to Staltus, brings an increased damage in his passive, which inflicts 20% more damage against targets whose defense is lower than this champion's defense. So 9 times out of 10, he's going to have a 20% damage boost. In order to get that 20% damage boost from Staltus, you need to have, 4 debuffs on the enemy? So 4 debuffs on the enemy is going to be harder to reach than having more defense on this champion than the enemy has. Ragash should majority of the time be doing that 20% more damage without much of an issue whatsoever. So now let's jump in here and talk about the masteries for each one of these champions. What I've done for this video, and if you've seen my champ versus champ videos before, I make everything exactly the same. Now with this, it's going to be a little bit different because we do have Helm Smasher. I usually don't like doing Helm Smasher simply because it adds a little bit extra RNG. But for this situation, we're just going to go ahead and do it. I don't feel like resetting them and paying for gems, so we're just going to leave the Helm Smasher. We should still get a pretty good idea. So they have the exact same setup. Technically, the defense tree is an excellent option as well, getting that extra defense. They're defense-based nukers, but they also bring some debuffs that could help with the turn meter boosting. They could actually extend the debuffs, the decreased defense and the decreased speed and decreased crit damage. The stun can't be extended, but currently these are the masteries we currently have set up just for some extra damage. These are just your typical damage-based masteries, more or less. Now, as far as the blessings, I usually forget about this, but I'd probably go Lightning Cage just to protect the buffs they have. Honestly, I love Lightning Cage. There's a lot of different buff ideas you could go. Soul Reap for some extra damage potential. Depends on what star ranking your champion is, but as far as PvP goes, I just really love Lightning Cage, and it also gives you some extra crit damage once you get to this 4-star awakened spot. As far as the attack, it's not going to do anything, but you do get a little bit extra HP. Now, let's jump into the best part. The best part is going to be the actual gearing of these champions. So, if you've watched my champ versus champ videos before, you're going to know that I don't equip any accessories onto these champions. The reason being is if I equipped accessories, it would skew the results quite a bit potentially, because I want these champions to be compared apples to apples, basically, okay? Your base defense on Staltus is going to be higher than the base defense on Ragash. He's going to take advantage of that. We're going to use that. Your accessories for Banner Lords may be significantly better than your accessories for Skinwalkers, okay? I don't want that thrown into the mix. The base stats, that's perfectly fine. That's normal. The accessories, I don't want to do that, okay? So we're going to use the exact same gear, the gear up here. I've removed all my Faction Guardians, so I got no Faction Guardian benefits for either one of these champions factions. So this should be a pretty fair comparison as far as champ to champ. Now, where is Valkyrie? Neither one of these champions I'm going to be intentionally building with accuracy. The reason why is because, to be honest, if you build with, say, 300 accuracy, or if your goal is to build a lot of accuracy on these champions, it's going to be pretty difficult to hit good damage dealing stats as well. So you kind of got to decide, do you want this champion to hit really hard, be your main defense nuker, or do you want this champion to be more so like a support / damage dealer? Both very viable builds, but you got to be mindful, because if you split it down the middle and you go a little bit of both, it's going to be a little tricky to get the best of either one, you know? Now, as far as arena goes, we're going to apply the debuffs on champions who don't build much resist. That shouldn't be an issue. but I'm not necessarily building for that. Only 151 speed. Not a huge deal. It's going to be fine. The teams I'm running, it shouldn't be much of a problem at all. 4,400 defense. So here's the stats for Staltus Dragonbane. 4,400 defense, 4,472, 228% crit damage, and then 179 accuracy. As you may have already noticed, there will be timestamps down below, so you guys can scroll around as you need. But what I want to do is start with Staltus in a few different areas, and then we'll jump into testing out Ragash. So first things first, campaign. It's not really going to matter. They both can do campaign perfectly fine. It's going to be very similar. Staltus is going to do it faster, simply because he has 2 AoE abilities, okay? That lends itself to being no problem whatsoever. Not a great affinity. You're not going to use these champions as campaign farmers. I'm not going to actually show all this stuff because honestly, it's quite pointless. So I don't know why I'm even showing it right now. But we're going to, once we finish this, we're going to jump back into the actual testing in the realistic areas. So here we go. 21 seconds. Terrible. Fellhound, much better. Skullcrown, much better. Don't use him. You don't need him for campaign, right? So as far as dungeons go, this could be pretty huge. If you're using him in dungeons, build him with accuracy. Build him with perception, build him with speed, build him with accuracy sets, whatever it may be. Build him with accuracy, you're going to have a big help in your dungeons. Honestly, he can even be used in Fire Knight. Fire Knight, whatever stage you're looking for, obviously be mindful of the affinity, but he has a 2-hitter that decreases the turn meter on his A1. He has 2 hitters on his A2, and he has a decreased speed on his A3. I'm not for sure which one would be met. I'm pretty sure the decreased speed would be met on his A3 ability. So as far as dungeons, build him with accuracy, he's going to be great. Fantastic champions. Faction Wars, he's going to hard carry it. He's going to lock out the waves consistently. Very, very, very solid champion. Arena, this is going to be where the main testing comes in, is in the arena. This is where there's a lot of complexities, a lot of small details that could make one champion better than the other. So we'll go over that in just a few minutes. Clan Boss, we're not really going to talk about that. Neither one of these champions are going to be next level amazing for Clan Boss. Now, if you're a new player, yeah, throw War Master on them, get them in there, get Lifesteal, Leech, whatever it may be. You're going to do good. But as far as Doom Tower, he can definitely be helpful. He has a stun, get through the waves. He brings the increased defense on himself. AoE decreased speed. Very solid champion, just in general. AoE stun is honestly probably the best debuff in the game, so it's not going to be much of an issue whatsoever. Now, as far as the actual damage testing goes, I typically would do that on the Doom Tower. Unfortunately, Doom Tower is not Void Affinity. I don't know what stage is Void Affinity, so I'm just going to do this since both these champions are different affinities. Staltus being Force and Ragash being Spirit, I want to make sure we get a good, fair test. Now, guys, we're going to get into something that's a little bit tricky, and that is if I bring Staltus, he brings his own increased defense. If I bring Ragash, he brings his own decreased defense. If I bring a Siphi, it lowers Staltus's value by himself, but it makes Ragash pretty fair. If I bring a Ghostborn or a decreased defense champion, it lowers the value of Ragash, but it makes Staltus a little bit more fair. So it's a little tricky, but to be honest, Ragash is not going to be built for accuracy. So as far as which champion could survive without the opposite effect, I think Ragash would be relying on too much RNG to consistently place that decreased defense. But for the sake of this video, I'm going to put in a Siphi plus a Ghostborn. I'm going to make sure we get the increased defense plus the decreased defense applied every single time. It's not going to be the best showcase as far as the champion's skills and the champion's kit actually is. That's going to be when the arena stuff actually comes into play. But for now, as far as just straight raw damage, let's see what we got going on. So Siphi buffs us up with increased defense, decreased defense on everybody, and then Staltus is going to hit for, let's see, we're going to use the A3 first, turn it to 1-time speed. We're hitting for 84,000, 100,000, so pretty daggone good damage. We'll actually just continue this through, and then we'll use his A2 ability here as well. Shouldn't be a huge difference, but to save some energy, let's see what he does on his A2. A2 ability, pay attention, and 45,000 and some 50,000. So probably about similar number. And if you look at his multipliers, that makes sense. So Staltus is right here. His multiplier on his A2 is a 2.1, and his multiplier on his A3 is a 4. So his A2 technically hits a little bit harder, but they're very similar damage overall. Now, with that said, if you're just using him and you had no Siphi, that A3 is going to be the best thing to use first because you need that increased defense. So you're going to use the A3, and then you're going to go into the A2. So as far as Staltus goes, he did, let's see, a total of 904,000 damage. If we take the 904,000 damage and divide it by 2, it's going to be about 452,000 damage on each of those AoE abilities. So now I'm going to go from Dragon, and we're going to go to Staltus straight into the arena, and then we'll come back, re-gear Ragash, and try him out in Dragon as well. So as far as the arena goes, let's go ahead and build a team around Staltus. So Staltus, remember, he has that increased defense ability himself, so we don't need to bring an increased defense champion. We're going to try this team right here. Pretty easy team, but just to get the ideas, right? Just get our toes wet, get a little feel for Staltus, see where he works and how he works. So let's go ahead and try this one out. So we have Staltus in the team, but who do we bring alongside Staltus to make the most sense? Well, Kymar is a pretty easy champion most of the time, but honestly, I think with Ragash, Kymar is a lot more needed than with Staltus, because Staltus has 2 AoE abilities, meaning that Kymar's reset, not really that needed. I mean, he has, what, 1 turn of doing that A1 ability, so not really the end of the world. Not really a big problem. Honestly, Kymar, not really needed. So let's go ahead and try to find somebody else. Kymar, his AoE A2 ability, his strip is absolutely amazing though. So we could definitely justify bringing the Kymar for that reason. But as far as a reset, it's not going to be needed. So I will put Kymar in there just because he's my fastest champion as far as being able to strip. 275, still pretty slow. Let me go ahead and throw my Arbiter in there as well. We'll just do Arbiter. Not a problem whatsoever. I'll try to keep the comparisons pretty similar. Arbiter's right there. Arbiter, we have 373, so she's okay speed. 373, we have Kymar. So as far as the 4th champion to go in this team, it's a little bit tricky because you're faced with the dilemma of if you bring a, say, Siphi, you're missing out on that A3 ability, increased defense that Staltus brings for himself, which is pretty massive. Just don't bring an increased defense champion and you're going to be in a good spot. Granted, if you want increased defense for your other champions, it may be worth bringing. The other issue is with Ragash. If you bring a champion who does decreased defense, then you're kind of mitigating some of his decreased defense. However, since you're not actually building Ragash to place the decreased defense, it's probably going to be best if you brought a champion to place the decreased defense, period, because Ragash's accuracy is going to be like 190, so it's going to be very, very low. So with that said, I'm going to put Ghostborn in there. He's probably going to weak hit, but it's okay. This is a team we use for both champions, at least for a little bit. It's not going to be super fair, though. So I got to figure this out. It could definitely be tricky, but here we go. Just for the damage test in general, let's see. We have Ghostborn hitting with the decreased defense on everybody. He basically killed the team as it is. Boost the turn meter a little bit more. And then Staltus, let's see what he hits for. We'll use his A3 ability. Increase defense first, and then nuking 76,000 damage. That is crazy. And the good thing, the other plus side, is that he's not going to take that much damage. He can't be decreased defense. He can't be weakened. So his damage that he takes really isn't going to be that crazy high. So we're in a very good spot there for sure. Got the res, no problem, because Staltus has 2 AoE abilities, which is absolutely incredible. Boom. 28 and 28, so we hit for what? 60,000 there? About 60,000. Pretty solid. We'll go to the next one. So this is going to be another big issue. So the first one we talked about, the issue being decreased defense and increased defense. If you bring one, you're kind of mitigating the champion who provides it. With Staltus, I think it's more important that he brings the increased defense because it allows you even more flexibility in your team. The issue is Staltus is weak affinity to the most popular arena defense champion, that is Duchess Lilitu. So Duchess, being spirit, is probably not going to die. So this is going to be a pretty interesting match. Whereas Ragash is neutral affinity, so he's going to hit her pretty daggone hard. Let's see how this works out. We're going to use the decreased defense AoE. Only on these 2. Hopefully we don't weak hit. But if we do, it's going to be a perfect example of where Staltus may struggle a little bit. Okay, there we go. Weak hit on Duchess. We just destroyed the Arbiter. Duchess, she's going to be staying up. She's going to be alive, which is going to be a pretty big issue. Duchess is a champion who, if you're doing plat push, you do not want her staying alive. You do not want consistent weak hits on a champion who is as tanky, as defensive as Duchess. So here's a glaring issue with Staltus. If you're using him on offense, it's going to be tricky. You have to be mindful of Duchesses, or you have to just not attack Duchesses. However, the other plus side comes in. Being force affinity, he is the strong affinity to possibly the best affinity for Nukers. So Nukers are typically magic affinity. Staltus is force affinity. So most Nukers that are going to be attacking into Staltus, your Gaius, your Trunda, your Astrolon, Countess Lix, if you build her as a nuker, whatever it may be, are going to be weak hitting or possibility to weak hit against Staltus, which in my opinion gives him the leg up on defense. So as a defense-based nuker, I think Staltus brings a lot. As an offense-based nuker, Staltus is going to do really good, except for against those Spirit Affinity champions, which just so happen to be some very annoying champions for sure. Your Duchess, your Mortu Macabre. The last thing you want to be doing is weak hitting on a Mortu, and then him proc and peril, and then you just getting one shot because he's going to be strong affinity, and he'll just absolutely destroy you. But as far as this goes, let's see. A3, boom, decreased defense, increased defense on himself. He's hitting for 68,000 damage. Absolute insane number. Before we switch over to showcasing Ragash, I want to find a team that would be good to showcase a Go Second version of a Staltus Dragonbane build with. So we have him in the same exact Savage stuff, of course, but I'm looking for a strip plus decreased defense. Here's a pretty decent example. A little bit low player level, but here we go. Let's go ahead and throw in my Duchess. We'll throw in a Mithrala, for example, and then let's throw in, I don't know, say, I could do Necrit, but I don't really want to do him. Let's do Kymar. Actually, Kymar will just die. So no Kymar. We'll just do these 3 champions. See how they work, okay? So the idea here is that even though Madame Ceres is going to strip and try to do decreased defense, Staltus is going to get nothing applied to him. So that Kandrifon, ideally, shouldn't do much damage. So I'm not going to, actually it doesn't matter. We have no decreased defense. So I'll go ahead and cleanse with Mithrala. We should be pretty good. Duchess will, actually let's not have Duchess buff, because that'll give us some more damage mitigation from the Kandrifon smack. There we go. 8,500 damage. It is a pretty low player level player. So that is something to keep in mind. Let's go ahead and try to use this. Okay, yeah, what I figured. We got locked out from True Fear. But either way, you can see this champion on a Go Second team is going to be mitigating the most important debuff you could bring against a defense-based champion. That is decreased defense. So he's just immune to that. However, that Kandrifon smacks hard, and he just deleted him either way. But that is something pretty interesting. So you could, in theory, build this guy, stack up more HP percentage on him, still have him built to hit pretty hard as a defense-based nuker, but you could stack him up to, say, let's say 40,000, maybe even 50,000 HP. We have no accessories whatsoever on him. So you could definitely get him to make a lot of sense on one of these Go Second type teams. Throw in a Necrit, and he's just not going to die. There's no way he's going to die with a Necrit on the team. So now I want to come in here, show you guys Staltus' stats one more time, and then switch his gear exactly over to Ragash. So Staltus' stats, just as a recap, 36,000 HP, 4472 defense, 228 crit damage. So now this goes on to Ragash. So there we go. We now have the exact same gear Staltus was wearing onto Ragash. So Ragash is sitting at 32,000 HP, 4440 defense, and then 215% crit damage. So obviously a little bit lower in all those base stats, a little bit higher speed, but nothing significantly different, really, to be honest. Let's go ahead and jump in here. I already talked about his different areas. Campaign, don't really care about that. Dungeons, he's going to be great. Faction Wars, absolutely amazing. Arena, let's talk about that in just a second. Clan Boss, not really a huge use. Doom Tower, the AoE stun is absolutely incredible. I do want to say on Dungeons, I think Staltus is going to have a little bit more use. However, having the AoE strengthen plus increased speed as a support champion could be amazing. So I think Ragash may actually bring a pretty similar amount of support. So honestly, both these champions are going to be amazing for Dungeons. Staltus a little bit better in some areas, and Ragash maybe a little bit better in others. So now let's go ahead and jump into Dragon Stage 23, Void Affinity, and see what kind of damage Ragash can do compared to Staltus. Remember, Staltus on his A2 or A3, actually on both of his abilities, did 452,000 damage each. About. So let's see what Ragash can do from his just one. He only has one AoE ability, so keep that in mind. It's his A2. That's all he's got. It's the only thing. 100,000 damage, 80,000 damage, so pretty impressive numbers. He did 492 damage. Okay, so that's definitely more than what Staltus had done. So if Ragash did 492,000 damage, that could just be some differences between Helm Smasher Prockin and Helm Smasher not, but it's about 10% difference between what Ragash did and then what Staltus did, with Ragash doing a little bit more damage. Now, I don't think this is going to be a perfect comparison, because like I said, Staltus doesn't need increased defense. We brought Siphi. Ragash does need the increased defense, but he doesn't need the decreased defense. We brought Ghostborn. So it is going to be a little different for both these champions. The teams you build are going to be a little bit different, but the damage is very, very similar. And the same thing is shown in the actual multipliers. So Ragash, his multiplier on his A2, a 4.3. Slightly higher than either of the multipliers for Staltus. Ragash also brings a 20% damage increase for champions whose defense is lower than his, which is going to activate majority of the time. I'm only going to do one test for Dragon. So we're going to go ahead and jump into the arena, which honestly, I think this is the place most players are going to be using him. And we're just going to swap out Staltus, and we're going to put in his place Ragash. We're going to drop out Duchess and whoever I just had, Mithrala, and add in the Kymar, Arbiter, plus Ghostborn. So let's see how these champions perform. This shouldn't be too difficult of a team to go against. We're all good affinity against all these champions. Now, I mentioned before that Staltus has an issue against Duchess. Well, Ragash has no issue with Duchess. However, he does have an issue with those magic affinity Nukers because he's spirit affinity. So your Trundas, your Gaius, your magic affinity champions, your Seal of the Drakes, Ragash is going to weak hit those. He's going to have a hard time killing them. So if you're using him on defense, people are going to see that and be like, okay, this is going to be a pretty easy champion to kill because I can just bring my Trunda, my Hefrak, my Rhodos, whatever it may be, and just one-shot this champion. Not much of a threat. Whereas with Staltus, it's kind of like, force affinity, I don't know if I want to deal with that. Whereas on offense, you see Duchesses more frequently. So Ragash is going to be no problem whatsoever. Actually, let's go ahead and find on Duchess. Shouldn't be too difficult. Yeah, so I refreshed for a minute and I found a team that would definitely be a nightmare for Staltus. Duchess, Spirit Affinity, Magnar, Spirit Affinity, both very tanky champions in general, very high HP. But with Ragash, no problem. No weak hits. We're neutral affinity. Shouldn't be an issue. Now, I did take out the Ghostborn. We have Siphi in here instead. Hopefully, we can still place our decreased defense, but to be honest, it won't really matter. The reason why is because we should be able to get through it. We should be able to kill him. We'll see. But I can't use Ghostborn because my team's not speed tuned. Ideally, I'd still have a decreased defense champion. Like if I was actually running this team, I'd have a decreased defense champion. But we shouldn't have any weak hits whatsoever. I don't really want to use this A2. Potential reaction hits. So we're just going to place a strengthen. Hopefully get back through the turns. Because they're going pretty slow. Reaction would just mess this whole thing up. I guess we just wake them up. Actually, we're just going to do one Ragash hit. I want you guys to see what Ragash hits for one time. That Magnar was going very slow though, so I don't want to risk that. We'll sleep the Duchess again. A2 from Ragash. Let's see what he hits for. Boom. Okay, he placed a decreased defense. Perfect. Hit the Duchess for 48,000 damage. That's without any accessories. So we definitely get higher damage than that as we move up higher and higher. And to be honest, he almost killed the Magnar. Placed a stun. He has what, 180 accuracy? So you can see that while he doesn't have much accuracy, he's still placing the stuns pretty well, to be honest. I'm definitely quite impressed that he actually even placed a stun. Unfortunately, they got the full res off. That's not great whatsoever. But if we can get back to that ability, we can just do the A2 once again. No problem whatsoever. He does have very low cooldowns on that A2 ability, so it shouldn't be too big of an issue. But here we go. Let's go ahead and increase defense on himself. Boom. Duchess is gone. Staltus would have had a much harder time actually getting rid of that Duchess because of the weak hits. So that's something to definitely be mindful about, is when you're doing champions like this, you really got to be careful about the affinities, especially if you're doing arena offense. It makes a huge difference. So we're not going to be able to res this. Lydia's going to block it. But, okay, there we go. So either way, we're not going to win this match. The team is not set up to go perfectly against this team anyways. They're going to res, so on and so forth. Ragash, not the perfect gear, but you guys get the idea. So hopefully with those short showcases of both Ragash as well as Staltus, you can kind of get an idea how each champion works and where each champion shines. So in my opinion, if you're building a defense team, if you're building a go second team, and you're wanting to strictly target those teams with maybe in 3v3 that have magic affinity nukers, they're fast, they hit hard, then maybe build Staltus because he's going to survive. No decreased defense can be placed on him, and he hits really daggone hard. If you're building a team for offense and you're running into a lot of Duchesses, definitely build a Ragash. Maybe even run an increased accuracy, plan to place a stun, because if you're specifically trying to get rid of Duchesses and she's a problem, placing the stun could be good. Maybe it's a situation where you do throw in, say, a Lady Kimmy or a champion like that for the increased speed plus increased accuracy. Build a little bit of accuracy, get that 50% boost, and maybe start placing the stuns consistently. But as far as in general, I would definitely build both of these champions with just outright damage. I personally, as far as PvP goes, would not invest too much in accuracy because you split your focus too much if you do that. I think Staltus is better on defense, a very good go second champion, and on offense, if you're just avoiding Duchesses, he's going to perform perfectly fine. But if you start running into Duchesses, you're going to have a big issue with consistent weak hits, and being force affinity, it's not going to be great. He's going to smash those magic affinity champions, though, who are typically a pretty big issue. So they're both great champions. I don't think either one of these champions, honestly, is like better than the other. They're both going to carry you in faction wars, help you in dungeons if you need it, do very good in arena as a defense-based nuker. One big thing to keep in mind also is that Ragash does need to be ran alongside a champion like Mithrala for the increased defense, Siphi for the increased defense, whereas Staltus doesn't need any increased defense whatsoever because he places it on himself for 3 turns, which is extremely, extremely useful. So guys, let me know down below, what champion do you think is better, Staltus or Ragash? Or are you kind of at the same spot as me, where both these champions are really good and neither of them are really better? It just depends on how your account is set up, what you have inside your account, and what kind of team you're trying to build. I think Staltus is more tanky, better passive to survive. So yeah, hope you guys enjoyed the video. There's a champ versus champ for Staltus and Ragash, and hope you guys have a happy Thanksgiving. I'll catch you on the next video.